Hello everyone, welcome to the Natural Animal Podcast. I have a very special guest for you today. We've just worked it out a little while ago before we started our chat. We've known each other for 20 years. And his name is Jed Goodfellow. And we had a lot of fun in Sydney back in the day. I think that's not where we first met though, but we first met, he was going to Griffith University and he was, I don't know, I can't remember. He had some head role for the Griffith University Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. I'm pretty sure that was the acronym.
I almost forgot all about that.
Oh, see, there you go. That's how we met. I was like, oh my, that's when I just found out about animal law. And I wanted to immerse myself in it because I had the plan that I was going to become an animal lawyer. So I had to do whatever I could to create that. And so I found the GUSPCA, or I found Jed first, and then Jed told me about the GUSPCA. And then I joined, even though I wasn't even a uni student. I'd already done my time at uni. But I was just like, oh, I'll just do this. And it was all volunteer and everything. That is how we first met. And so from that point, we kind of had this, I can't think of the word, simultaneous, or we would just, I eventually got a job as an animal lawyer, and we ended up just having these interactions, and we were at the same events and we knew the same people, and it was so much fun. And then I left that world, but we have remained in contact. And Jed does, the reason why he's on the show today is not just because he's a friend and I think he's great, because that's not the reason why. Well, it's part of it, but it's because the work that he does is so important, and he is so committed to his work. Like, I left that area because various reasons. If you listen to other podcasts that I've done, you will already know my story. But I left, and Jed stayed, and so through all that time, 20 odd years, he's had roles at the RSPCA. I think the South Australia role was the first role, and then he started teaching animal law, and then he did his PhD in animal welfare regulation. I would say, no offense, Jed, he does have a bit of a nerdiness around him when it comes to animal protection and animal advocacy, but we need that, right? It's not just about, look at this horrible thing that's happening. You have to know that this is happening. We need to have the seriousness behind it. We need to look at, what is the legal system? What is the governance system? What is the political system? Are animals protected? If they're not, what can we do about it? What can we do about it? What are some solutions that we can improve the lives of animals? And so Jed has committed to that work for a really, really long time. So of course I had to have him on the show, and that is why he's here today, for us to have a good chat about all of the amazing work he does, what you can do, what inspires him, what makes Jed Jed. So I can't wait for you to meet him. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Natural Animal Podcast. I'm your host, Ruth Hatton. I'm an animal naturopath and just a big animal lover in general. Here on the show, we share thoughts and ideas about the nature of animals, their preferences, their behaviours and their ways of being, to engender a greater understanding, respect, compassion and love for all animals, companion, farm and wild. Today's episode is brought to you by Frontier Pets, creators of nutritionally superior pet food inspired by traditional whole food diets with a modern and ethical approach. Stay tuned for a special podcast listener discount. Welcome, Jed, to the Natural Animal Podcast.
Hi, Ruth. Thanks very much for that introduction. I can't believe you just called me nerdy, but I'll let that go.
Right?
I prefer the term academic, but anyway.
Well, yes, academic. That's probably a more politically correct. But you know me, I just call it how I see it. And by nerdy, I do definitely mean that academic. It's the more of the yeah.
No, I am nerdy as well, so don't worry about that. No offense.
But that's what makes the work that you do so impactful. And so I guess we were talking about before I press record, what is Jed's origin story? And so Jed, I would love for you, I already told everybody, you've been doing this work in the animal advocacy field for a very long time, 20 plus years. Was GUSPCA the beginning, or were you at RSPCA then as well?
Yeah, I was at RSPCA before that. So yeah, I started out as a volunteer actually with the RSPCA in Coffs Harbour, going way back to my teenage. So yeah, quite a few years before the good old GUSPCA. But
I can't believe I remember that.
Yeah, I've forgotten all about that. I can't even recall that first meeting. But yeah, the GUSPCA was something that I started after moving to Brisbane, and then when I started working for the RSPCA up there, RSPCA Queensland.
Yes. Did you work at RSPCA South Australia?
Yes, I did. So
you did. I thought so.
Queensland as an inspector for about 5 years, and then down to South Australia after I did the law degree to work as the prosecutor there for RSPCA South Australia for a couple of years. And then after that, after just, probably about 6 or 7 years of doing the enforcement work and just seeing cases of cruelty day after day, I thought it would be good to go more into the front end, if you like, of animal law reform and policy and political liaison work. And that's when I started the PhD at Macquarie, and then started working for the national office out of Canberra, doing political liaison, law reform, policy work to try and essentially to address the problems that I was seeing in the enforcement side, or the deficiencies in our animal welfare laws, to try and start patching up those loopholes through law reform. So, I kind of started at the back end and then went to the front end.
The front, and that I think it makes in terms of your experience real special, because you've worked in both the front end and the back end. You've been on the ground and you've seen how the laws work or don't work in practice in the time that you were as part of the RSPCA inspectorate. And that would have just been, I imagine, like the cruelty cases you would have seen must have just been horrendous.
Yeah, they absolutely were. And I can't see how anyone can really do that job for longer than a few years before it starts really getting to you. I guess it would be the same with any kind of frontline work. Emergency services, I'd imagine, would be similar, but you're just seeing really horrible stuff on a daily basis, and it does take a toll on you. So I think it's very healthy for there to be rotational programs, that sort of thing, to give people a break from the frontline stuff. But some people cope really well with it.
Yeah, they do. Some people are really good at compartmentalizing. I can't believe I got that word right. But also, like Shatha, Shatha Hamadi, Animals Australia, for those of you who don't know, I did an episode with her in season 1 of the podcast. Jed knows Shatha. We all kind of, those of us who were around, 10, 20 years ago in that kind of era, we all kind of know each other. Some of us aren't around anymore, had enough of the physical plane and decided to go off and be angels. But there are still a lot of us who are around that time, and I find it always interesting to see where everyone's at. And Shatha has a very unique way of being able to manage her emotional response and reaction to what she witnesses on the ground as a front line advocate for animals. So I encourage everyone to go back and listen to that show, because it is a beautiful show, but don't yet. Stay here with me and Jed. And then there are those of us like me, like I couldn't do that work. I couldn't work in any kind of inspectorate role, because I don't have enough of I would just get too angry and emotional and want to kill everybody.
you've really got to use a lot of emotional self-control and discipline. And I can remember the first few cases that I went out on. It was really confronting, and I had all of those emotions, boiling up. When you're dealing with people who were just, engaging in cruel acts towards animals and really just did not care at all about the animals that were under their control, and maintaining your discipline and ensuring that you do everything by the book to serve that animal that needs to be protected. That's what was the motivating factor, I guess. But having that emotional discipline over a long period of time can be really trying and taxing. I haven't listened to Sharda's podcast, but I have spoken to her about her frontline work that she's done, and of course she's seen some really horrific things in investigations. So, yeah, she's obviously got
listen to it. You can listen to it tonight. It's Friday night. Friday night entertainment. You can even watch the YouTube version and watch us. Very exciting.
I might do that. No, Friday night.
It is a beautiful. It is. We speak a lot about how she leans into spirituality,
right,
and that's what keeps her being able to do her job. Essentially, I think you've either got to have spirituality, or you've got to be an alcoholic, or do drugs, or just have very great control of your emotions.
Yeah, strong emotional intelligence, I think. But I couldn't go back to doing that work. I just don't think I would last. And but that work has given me the motivation to work in other areas that are hopefully will have an even bigger impact, because it's dealing with laws that will impact the lives of hundreds of millions of animals, literally. So I feel like you can serve more animals through the law and policy advocacy space than you can just doing the individual cases one after the other. And that's what motivated me to do the frontline work, the policy, political work.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess, we need both, but it's a matter of what work are you best suited to you, and then, giving your all to that. And some people can do that on the ground stuff really, really well and still stay sane and not murder anybody. And then, other people, it's like, no, I need to have a bit of a barrier, and I need to work on these more like governance systems and legal systems to really change the rules and change the policies to prevent and change how these laws and policies are enforced, because that is a massive issue. I still remember from way back when, but yeah, it's like, we need the on the ground, we need the frontline work, but we also know that we also need the people doing the legal work, the policy work, and the governance work. And you're obviously, that's where you shine, and you've got a PhD in it. So, that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the work that I'm doing now is, in a way, it's implementing the research that I did in the PhD. So it's addressing the fundamental deficiencies within our animal welfare governance system, which sounds a little bit boring, but when it comes to the work required to reform that system, it's actually really interesting work and really sort of dynamic work, and the strategies that we pursue to secure those reforms are really interesting and dynamic and innovative, and we're seeing progress already, which is great.
And we're going to get into the detail of some of that today, which I'm super excited to get some insight of you about what is going on. And I had something and I forgot what it was. Yes. So that's a positive as well, that you've been able to actually use your PhD in your work, that it wasn't just years and years. Because I remember when you were doing it, it was just, PhD, plus you were still working as well. And it's like all consuming. So it's great that you're able to use that work and then bounce off of that to actually go out and do what you spoke about in the PhD. Not that I've read it. I actually haven't read it.
Yeah, I did not want to dedicate 4.5 years of my life just to write something that was going to sit on a shelf and gather dust. Unfortunately, a lot of PhDs do precisely that, and it's, it just seems like such a waste. But the reason why I wanted to do the PhD was for it to have real world, impacts and consequences, and then to put it into action. So to put the reform recommendations into action and to start lobbying for those reforms. So it is very fulfilling to see some of those reforms actually starting to take place now at a state and federal level.
And you made it happen. So, I haven't even mentioned yet who you work for. I mean, you work for yourself, right? But I think you are one of the directors, right? And it was yours and some other people's who I also know from back in the day. Jed created, correct me if I'm wrong, or you can just tell me, but I will say that Jed is now involved in the Australian Alliance for Animals. What is that, Jed, and what role did you have in creating that?
Yeah, so the Australian Alliance for Animals, as the name suggests, is an alliance of 6 animal protection organisations. Many of them your listeners, I would imagine, would be familiar with. Animals Australia, Compassion in World Farming, Humane Society International, Four Paws Australia, World Animal Protection, and Voiceless, which is, of course, the place that Ruth used to work at.
Yeah.
And so these groups do fantastic work on a range of different advocacy issues, but all of them were coming up against the same barriers to progress. Whenever they were seeking law or policy reform through government, they weren't getting very far. So they were very good at creating public concern about a particular issue, about raising awareness, about exposing animal cruelty in different industries. But as soon as the issue then went into the government process for reform, because of the way we delegate animal welfare policy responsibilities to departments of agriculture and ministries for agriculture, it would then mean that the livestock industries or whatever the animal industry was would then take control of the narrative, and basically out of the end of that, after years of work, would be something that would come out that would barely resemble what the community's concerns and expectations were when the issue entered that policy framework. So all of the groups, all of our members were really concerned about that. And myself and the other co-founders, Dr. Betta Jones, who was the former chief scientist of RSPCA Australia, and Dr. Meg Good, who was former legal counsel at Voiceless as well after Ruth.
You're all doctors, and I should have correctly introduced you as Dr. Jed Goodfellow.
Instead of just nerdy Jed.
Nerdy Jed.
But we're not we're not real doctors. Even so, Bitta's a zoologist by training, so her PhD was in zoology. Meg's was in environmental law, and mine was in animal welfare regulation, as you've mentioned.
Yeah.
So we got together. Yeah, it's a great combination. You got science, law, regulation, politics.
And please tell them I said hello.
I will. I'll send the podcast through to them.
Yes. Hi, Bitta. Hi, Meg.
And but together with the members, Bitta, Meg, and I got together and then created the alliance. So
I didn't know that it came about in creation with those member organisations as well. Yeah. I thought it was just like a Jed and a Bitta or Jed and Bitta first, and then Meg, and then the organisations came in. But I had it completely wrong, didn't I?
No, it was a very collaborative, origin. So we went around to the members, because we all worked very well with the leaders of these different organisations, and so we all worked and cooperated and collaborated on different campaigns and initiatives, but there was no formal mechanism for coordinating the sector on key issues, and particularly on the key structural and institutional reforms that are required to see progress in all of these areas. When we had those meetings with the CEOs of the different groups, I would say within 5 minutes they were like, yes, this is a good idea. We'll be part of it. It really didn't take a lot of convincing, because everyone could see the need for an entity like the Alliance, and everyone could see the need for taking a really strategic, dedicated approach to addressing those fundamental institutional barriers. So that, led to the creation of the Alliance. That was a little over 2 years ago now. So we launched in March 2022.
Gosh,
And
it feels like so much longer ago. Yeah.
Yeah. In one way it does, and then in another way it feels like a blur because we've been absolutely flat out ever since. We've been really busy, but in a really good way. The opportunities that we've had, and just the support from the members and the broader animal protection community as well, because we don't just work with our 6 core members, we also work with a range of other groups, and we coordinate a range of other groups on key issues. So the camaraderie, the goodwill, the focus on the cause has been extremely encouraging. And yeah, we're in a really good position now, and we've had a few early but significant wins. And moving forward, I think we've got a great strategy for achieving some even bigger reforms in the future.
Fabulous. Do you have any? So obviously we've got the benefit, back in the day when we were, working at the same time when I was at Voiceless and you were at Macquarie / RSPCA. We didn't really have any big political clout, and everything was very I said it so well the first time. Compartmentalised and broken, essentially, and everyone was just doing the same thing and not getting anywhere. Yeah. Although Voiceless was always very different. Voiceless always had that very strong focus on the law, But, today in terms of the political arena, we've obviously got, I don't know how much the Greens are doing these days, but they still have their finger in the animal advocacy pie. You've obviously got the AJP, Animal Justice Party, that continues to grow and grow and grow. And I'm always reading, like when I'm reading a particular politician from the AJP, reading her, looking at her or his social media, I'm always like, it sounds so amazing. All these bills are getting passed. We're going to have great animal protection. Then I'm like, I know it's not that clear cut. So my point of bringing all this up, I've gone a bit off tangent, is do you have much involvement with any of the political parties?
Yeah, that's what we do.
Certain things that you're not going to be able to share on this show because, confidentiality, but
that's what we do. We're almost like lobbyists for the animal protection community. So we do a lot of political engagement across the board, state and federal, and all political parties, not just AJP Greens. We work a lot with and meet with members of the Labor Party, members of the Liberal Party, not so much the Nationals for obvious reasons, but we still meet with Nationals members from time to time, just probably not as often as we do with pretty much every other party across the political spectrum. The independents as well, we work very closely with them as well. That's a huge part of what we do, and the reason why I think we've been successful in getting that sort of access with them is one, because we have the kind of policy technical capacity to provide good policy briefings on laws and different issues, but also because
there's such an interesting stat, when you talk about 2 million, I do not know what the current population of Australia is. I always remember what it was like 10 years ago when it was 20 million.
It was about 28 million. It's getting up there. Close to 30.
Up there. Right. So we need to get at least 10%. So we need about another 0.8 million people to start, loving animals and voting for them, for their interests. So come on, all of you 0.8 million people, Australians out there. And I know it's not just Australians that listen to this show, but after today's show, you're going to have some ideas as to what you can do, and so that your political parties or these political parties you can then go, oh, well, actually, it's 3 million Australians, more than 10% of the country are seriously concerned about animal welfare, Mr. Blah, blah, blah. you need to do X, Y, Z.
And that's only our supporters, so the supporters of our members. Of course, for general welfare issues, we have the majority of the country on board. So whenever there's surveys, polls done of do you support phasing out battery cages or phasing out live exports, it's always north of 70% support for those things, and they're the issues that we will focus on. We focus on the issues that have popular support. Because that's what gives us the leverage to pursue it through the state and federal legislatures. We don't pursue issues that the broader Australian community don't currently support because we're not going to get any traction. If the community's not behind it, we're not going to get politicians to listen to us. So we focus on those issues that do have popular support, which thankfully is, for the majority of animal issues, there is popular support there. And it's 26 million.
26. Okay, so it's only 0.6 million. But as you said, they're not all member supporters. There's plenty of Australians who care, but they're just not members. So become a member today, people. And so it was obviously battery cages, as you said, meat chickens. You describe it as live lamb cutting on the Alliance website, which is so, I read that and it's just it's so graphic. But that's going to be things like tail docking. And
it's mulesing. So mulesing, of course, no one knows what mulesing is outside of the industry. Yeah. So we're not going to continue using the industry's own language because consumers don't know what that means. So adopting a more descriptive term is more effective with and more accurate term as well. It is live. It's cutting live lambs while they're live. You don't want to just use the term lamb cutting because people just think you're talking about cutting up a piece of meat.
Exactly.
So live lamb cutting is what mulesing is. Unfortunately, it's taking off big chunks of skin from the back end of sheep to try and mitigate the incidence of fly strike. But there are more humane alternatives to mitigating fly strike than literally shaving pieces of flesh off the back end of.
Well, did you know you might want to hire me because from an animal, I'll put my animal naturopath head on. There are herbs that you can use to help with preventing fly strike.
Okay, right. There you go. We'll have to put you in touch with the Australian Wool Innovation, the industry body. So
yes, that would be fun. It's been a long time since I've spoken to animal industries, very long time. And then you've also got live sheep exports and the governance system. And Max is here. This is Max Jed.
Hello, Max. I've got a cat named Charlie who is same sort of colour, but he's shorter hair.
Yeah, I have a short hair tabby too. Yes, he often likes to come up here. For those loyal podcast listeners and watchers, they all know who Max is.
Charlie knows when I'm on a meeting or something, so he generally doesn't jump up. But if this goes beyond an hour, that's his limit.
He's like, come on, Dad, enough.
Need a cat.
Time for cats. Yeah. So you're covering, it's obviously smart decision making. Let's focus on the areas where we can get where there's the most influence, where people are most concerned about. And so it always seems like, I think back in the day, let's talk about battery cages. Advocacy for ending battery cages is ancient. I remember I've got this photo of me with a chicken mask on. It was in Sydney, and it was David Shoebridge from the Greens, and it was all about the battery cage. It was when I was working for Voiceless, and it was all about banning the battery cages. And they had cages, and you could go in and stand in the cage and then take photos.
I remember that. Yeah, I don't think I was there, but I remember that demonstration. Yeah.
Yeah. It was fun. But it's amazing that we still have them. And I'd love your perspective on this because there's certainly been progress. If you go into the supermarket and you look at the eggs, and the cage egg is a smaller section, but people are still buying them. And for as long as people buy them, because they're the cheapest, right? As long as people buy them, the industry is going to be there's a need for it, blah, 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 blah. So can you just talk a bit about the battery cage campaigning and where we're at, and what's your kind of like estimate in terms of how close are we to finally banning the battery cage?
Yeah, we're pretty much there, but the phase-out timeline is going to be 2032 to 2036, so a pretty long phase-out time frame.
2032
to 2036, depending on the age of the cages. So the regulations are designed to take into account how old the cages are. If they're older, then they were installed back early in the 2000s. They need to be phased out by 2032. If they were only installed within the last 8 years or so, they've got a further lead-in time to 2036.
And this is all done for economics, right?
Yeah. Well, it's to give the industry that time to make the adjustments, the issue is that this, as you mentioned, the campaign against battery cages has been going on for decades. So the industry has known this is coming, and the writing's been on the wall for many years. So there is an argument to say, well, you should have been investing in non-cage systems many years ago, and the fact that you've invested in them, in recent times is a reckless decision, and perhaps you shouldn't be given the very long lead-in time to phase them out because of that. But governments will generally, if they're going to adopt major animal welfare reforms, they generally will give industry time to make those adjustments. And for us, we just want to see certainty. So we want to see all the states and territories regulate that phase out. So we're at the stage now where the ministers have endorsed the new standards that include the phase out. It's a matter now of getting them to regulate them, to make them legal and enforceable standards in all the states and territories. And we're seeing progress there. The Victorian government's leading progress there. Victoria is one of the biggest egg producing states. And once you get one of the big ones on board, then the others come on board. They're very long scale reform programs. And when I'm feeling a bit depressed about the length of time it takes, I like to look at things in a historical perspective. And when you look at things, over the course of decades, you see actually we are making a lot of progress. Obviously not quick enough for the animals. I do find inspiration in looking at, where we were 20 years ago compared to where we are today on a range of different issues. And we are moving forward. We're moving in the right direction, and that's the main thing. It's just trying to speed that up. But we will see the end of the battery cage in Australia by 2036.
Yeah, so another 12 years, which feels like forever, But I guess it's kind of like you're doing deals, right? You're negotiating a deal, and you could get up all in your arms about that's too long, and then deals off, and then cages continue forever. And it's kind of like, it's like any, as we train, as, people who are trained as lawyers, and in any role where there's negotiation, which as a lawyer, there's always negotiation. One of the things that we're taught and we're trained is that when you're negotiating, generally it's like you're never going to walk away 100% happy. You've got to give, and there's going to be give and there's got to take. And it's like, well, what can you live with at the end of the day? And it's better that there's a long phase out period than no phase out at all.
Yeah, that's the inevitability of politics at the end of the day. It's compromise is inevitable, and we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because that's not going to help animals and get the outcomes we need at the end of the day. So, you do. Unfortunately, you've got to take quite a pragmatic approach when you're dealing with politics and these big political decisions, because at the end of the day, they are political decisions. It comes down to ministers making political calculations about, the cost versus benefit rewards of making these decisions, and we've just got to incentivize them to make the right decisions for animals, and we do that through the millions of people who care about animal welfare. But yes, we don't get everything we want, but as long as we're, as I said, moving in the right direction and making that progress, that's and achieving the outcomes for animals, they're the main. That's the main criteria for success, I think, over the longer term.
Yeah, and do you? after you've kind of like, you've done the wheeling and the dealing and you've reached an agreement, do you then continue to monitor to ensure that actually what they've agreed to, they make it happen?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of it. And just to clarify, on things like battery cages, it's not like we're not there in the minister's office making a deal. We campaign for a particular outcome to phase out battery cages, and we will put on the table, a phase out timeline that's much shorter than what the government eventually accepts. But ultimately, it's the government's decision. They make the decision. And generally, it's a decision that's made in conjunction with all of the state and territory agriculture ministers, which is one of the biggest problems in animal welfare policy, is the fact that we're putting agriculture ministers in charge of animal welfare policy decisions. And a big goal of the Alliance is to move animal welfare policy outside of agriculture portfolios, so we can create more independent frameworks for where these standards can be created and where the decisions can be made, where greater weight can be placed on the interests of animals in those decision-making processes. But it's on the big ticket items that they ultimately go up to the politicians for decision, which is means it's fundamentally political in nature.
So if you're not doing the wheeling and the dealing, how does it work then practically in terms of the Alliance? Are you doing policy briefings and sending them to the relevant ministers, and then?
Yeah, so we do a range of things. So we do that. We do ministerial briefings. We work with public servants within the departments as well. So in the process for setting the standards, we will be stakeholders in those processes, and we will advocate strongly within the formal processes. Part of our role is to scrutinise and to make decision-making processes accountable and transparent. So we will apply FOI applications, so freedom of information applications, to see where sources of influence are coming in to steer or direct ministers and politicians in different directions where they shouldn't be present in the process, and then we can expose that publicly to bring more accountability to the process. So there's a range of different ways that we will lobby and advocate for animals in those processes, but the political briefings are a big part of it. So just providing the technical policy input, but then also aligning that with political interests as well, and ensuring that politicians are aware of just how strong the community support is for particular measures, and through all of that, then you do at the end of the day, if that's successful, you get an outcome, but generally it won't be the outcome you want, but it's an outcome that goes in the right direction. Because, of course, the ministers and the governments, they're balancing, the interests of the livestock industries as well, and they're very powerful, and they will push back, and we've got to meet that power with our own political power, and then we arrive somewhere in the middle, and that's what politics is kind of all about. Saying that, like sausages, you don't want to see how laws are made, because it is a pretty messy process. There's no real, like standard approach. It depends on the particular issue. It depends on the power of the respective stakeholders involved, and it depends on a range of different external factors as well. Like when the decision on battery cages was about to be made, the week before that decision was coming down, the cage egg industry launched a major fear-mongering campaign, a scare campaign, essentially, about cost of living and the fact that the price of eggs will triple or quadruple.
Rocket. You won't be able to afford to eat eggs anymore.
Yeah. And during a cost of living crisis, which we're in, that was very effective, and it spooked quite a few of the ministers into not committing completely to the phase-out timeline. And then add to that,
they could have spent that money by giving it to the people to buy the free-range eggs instead. Instead of
Yeah.
a fear-mongering campaign.
Yeah, yep. It's they invest a lot in these sort of campaigns, because they do have a lot at stake, and they don't want to have to invest in different systems.
Yeah.
If they don't have to, and they will hedge their bets, and they will put a lot of money behind lobbying to prevent change and progress. And it's unfortunate, but that is just a reality of politics at the end of the day. And we've got to, instead of just sitting back and saying, oh, the whole system's rigged and corrupt, we've got to understand how the system does work, and then we've got to put in place strategies to ensure that we uncover those dodgy things that are going on, and the ultimate end goal is to reform the whole system so that animal welfare policy is not as vulnerable to those sort of interests and deals that go on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I love that, because it's so easy to get frustrated and angry about things, but it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? It's like, what I don't know if they're still called that these days. I'm sure it is. It's like, the armchair advocates. They're all like up in arms, but they never actually do anything. And it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can be as simple as signing a petition, because every little bit helps. Did you know that pets are the second largest consumers of factory farmed meat after humans? As a conscious consumer and pet parent, I believe it's not just about my pet's health, but also the well-being of the animals that become their food that matters. It is vital to respect the ancestral and biological needs of cats and dogs while feeding them nutritionally superior food that honours where it comes from. At Frontier Pets, the mission is clear: to help end factory farming by reducing the demand for intensively farmed ingredients in pet food. As someone who deeply cares for all animals, companion, farm and wild, I fully support this cause. If you share these values, I encourage you to explore Frontier Pets' range of nutritionally superior and ethical pet foods. By choosing Frontier Pets, you're not only giving your pet premium quality food, you're also supporting socially and ethically responsible practices. Visit frontierpets.com.au to learn more. With Frontier Pets, your pet can change the world. And as a special treat for my Natural Animal Podcast listeners, you can enjoy 15% off your first order with the code NaturalAnimal15. Just a heads up, this offer doesn't apply to subscription orders. What I'm gleaning from what you're saying, but I kind of already know because I know the work you do and I know you, but for the purpose of the show, I'm going to pretend that I don't know. And you're certainly going to speak to things that I don't know. So, it's a learning moment for everybody. You speak about the governance system and, that, I mean, from what I'm getting from what you're saying is that the main problem here is how the system is governed, how the animal use or animal production industries system is operated. Could you distill basically what you've said? And I'm not being very clear, and I'm wanting a clear answer. So what is wrong? Oh, that's my Zoom has
an automatic thumbs up.
Automatic thumbs up. Yeah.
Zoom was just giving us some encouragement.
Yeah, thanks, Zoom. I really appreciate it, helping me get my words out from my brain, from my brain to my mouth. What is the problem with the current animal welfare governance system? And I said problem, but we know it's more than one. But what do you see are the main problems with the current governance system?
Yeah, so the main problem, as I alluded to earlier, is the decision by state and federal governments to delegate animal welfare responsibilities, both policy and regulatory responsibilities, to agriculture departments and ministries. So the difference there being that the department is the the section of the government that implements the laws and policies of the politicians that make up the government of the day, and the ministry is the agriculture minister. It's a politician that oversees the Department of Agriculture, and both of those entities, the minister's office and the Department of Agriculture, collectively have control of the nation's and the state's animal welfare policies. And that's problematic because, of course, their primary goal and responsibility is to promote productive, profitable primary industries and agricultural industries, which is a legitimate objective for them to pursue. That's in the public interest. Everybody wants to see a thriving agriculture sector, and they put food on the table. So there's nothing controversial about that. That's a necessity in life. So it's great to see them promoting productive, profitable primary industries. But the problem lies in when we delegate responsibilities to those very same people, where achieving the objectives of those responsibilities might come into conflict with their primary goals. So when it comes to animal welfare policy, many animal welfare reforms will inevitably require more input cost to the agriculture system. So there's a conflict between animal welfare and industry productivity in many areas. Sometimes they're mutually compatible, and improving animal welfare will increase productivity and vice versa. But in many cases, and indeed in all of the cases that become topics of debate, they're topics of debate because they're at loggerheads. So if you look at hens in battery cages are there because they're the most efficient means of producing eggs, but they completely deny the hens any ability to express any kind of normal natural behaviours. They can't even extend their wings inside battery cages. They live a really horrible, miserable life, a life that is not worth living. But moving away from battery cages into other systems of egg production, while we can still produce eggs en masse in non-cage systems, it will inevitably come at a greater cost. So when you go to the supermarket, yes, non-cage eggs are generally a bit higher in price than cage eggs. And that might change a little bit with increasing economies of scale if we move completely away from cages. So in the non-cage system, growing in scale brings the price down. But there is a slight increase in the cost. It's an increase that is so minute that most consumers won't have any difficulty accommodating, but it is nevertheless an increase, and therefore you have the relevant livestock industries will lobby very hard to say we don't want to see this change. And when you've got an agriculture minister who's supposed to be there about serving agriculture stakeholders, they're very susceptible to a process called regulatory capture, where the industry basically captures the government and the government policy. In other words, directs the government and the government's policy towards their own interests and away from the public interest. That's a process called regulatory capture, and that's what my PhD was identifying what regulatory capture is and does it exist within the agriculture sector when it comes to animal welfare regulation. And I found a lot of evidence of regulatory capture because of those governance arrangements. So moving animal welfare policy out of agriculture departments and ministries, putting it in a more independent framework, like setting up a national commission for animal welfare, which the Productivity Commission recommended. That Productivity Commission, not an animal advocacy organisation. It's all about improving the productivity of different industries in Australia, and they thought that would be a good idea, moving it into an independent animal welfare commission that set the standards and policy and advise government. So that's the kind of main barrier, and that's what we're working towards, trying to address and remove those institutional barriers to progress.
Yeah, I mean, an independent animal welfare commission or organisation is something that has been discussed in the animal welfare community for years. Are we any closer to that actually happening?
Yes.
You have a forecast.
Yeah, so I mean, at the last election, we were able to get the Labor Party to commit to setting up a Inspector General for animal welfare. That's not a commission for animal welfare. It's got a limited role. It's just overseeing the Department of Agriculture's role in regulating the live animal export trade. But it's nevertheless, it's a start. It's a building block. There's now a federal law that sets up that body that talks about animal welfare. So that in itself is significant. And over time, we can build on that office to increase its remit and its powers and resourcing, so that it can take on broader functions, including setting national animal welfare standards and coordinating states and territories on that process. At the New South Wales level, we were able to get the New South Wales Labor government in the last election at the state level to commit to setting up an independent Office of Animal Welfare, and we're working with the government at the moment on that model and introducing that policy sooner rather than later. It was supposed to be this year, but it looks like it might be a little delayed. But yeah, there's positive progress happening, and I think once we've got examples of those bodies operating effectively, then we will see them established at a state level all over the country, and then it will just become part of the norm for how you do animal welfare policy. We will look back at how we're dealing with animal welfare policy today, in 20 years' time, and just think, how could we have
how bizarre
had a system like that? It's exactly the same argument that we have with environmental protection authorities. Like, if a government today said we're going to abolish all of the independent environmental protection agencies and just delegate environmental protection standards to departments of mines and energy or resources,
complete conflict.
Yeah, you'd be like, no, that's crazy.
Yeah,
put it in. Yeah, so
self-regulation rarely works unless it's in your own favour.
Yeah, so I'm confident, very confident, we're going in the right direction on all of those reforms. And again, it's a long-term project. Yeah. It's not going to happen overnight. We're talking, in decades in terms of the timescales. But I'm confident in, a couple of decades we'll have a very strong independent animal welfare system that will place a lot more weight on both the interests of animals, but also the interests and the views of the community who are concerned about animal welfare. So it's as much about improving the democratic performance of the policy framework as it is about improving the welfare of animals at the end of the day, because at the moment there's a massive democratic deficit between what the community expects and where our industry standards are.
I don't think that is limited to animal welfare. I think there's a lot of aspects of politics and, the world in terms of that discrepancy between what the people want and care for versus what's coming out of the government. But don't get me started on that.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of examples, and the task for whatever the advocacy group is in that area is to find out, well, what is the democratic obstacle? What's preventing the public's will from being expressed within and reflected within our laws and policies, and then pursuing that and dismantling whatever the obstacle is, so that the public's view can actually be given expression, because that's how our system should work at the end of the day.
Exactly.
We've got a reasonable system of representative government, but there's a lot of problems with it, and it's about addressing those problems.
So when we eventually get these changes to the governance system, changes to the laws and the policies, and there might still be some people out there who think that don't the laws protect these animals? And I think what you've demonstrated through various means, one of which is this, this whole self-regulation mechanism and the conflict of interest that exists between industry and animals and what the people want. And obviously, the industry wants a profitable business, and sometimes that can conflict with or a lot of time, that's perceived that it can conflict with animal welfare. But there's one aspect, you can have the best laws and the best policies, and you'll know this because of your time at RSPCA and just generally, right, is enforcement. You can have the best laws, but if they're not enforced, they're not worth the paper that they're written on. So how does the Alliance, or you personally, does this independent system that you're striving for, this independent governance system that you're striving for, that puts animal welfare first, that makes it a priority, does that capture the enforcement piece?
It depends on the model you're looking at. And in our report, Building a Fairer Australia for Animals, we kind of set out what our preferred model would be. And at the state level, it would be to establish independent animal welfare authorities under state animal welfare law that would play a role in overseeing enforcement as well. So at the very least, reporting on enforcement performance to ensure that that laws are being monitored and upheld and enforced. At a federal level, the Commonwealth, the federal government doesn't really have much of a responsibility for on-the-ground enforcement. That's generally handled by the states and territories. So at the federal level, you would have more of a standard-setting, policy development, state and territory coordination role with the National Commission. And at the state level, the state animal welfare authorities would certainly play that role in overseeing enforcement. It doesn't mean that they would take over enforcement from RSPCA or the other groups that are currently enforcing the law, but the RSPCA inspectors, Department of Agriculture inspectors, or wherever the inspectors are appointed from, would then report to the state animal welfare authority. So there'd be greater consistency. You'd have one dedicated statutory body with independence that would be essentially like a centre for excellence in animal welfare policy and law, so that we have a more robust system. And of course, that all requires funding, and part of our campaign reforms is to increase the level of government investment in these animal welfare services as well.
So it's all a very big, there's lots to be done. And it can all seem very overwhelming and at times impossible. But, you guys know what you're doing. I mean, I know that. I know you know what you're doing. I remember you talking about regulatory capture years ago. I think you were giving a presentation. I think it was Newcastle.
Newcastle. Yes.
Long
I've been banging on about this for many years.
Very long time. Yes. I think, to give everyone hope, there's in this system of, this conflicted system that we operate in, progress is being made. There are people doing the work and having the talks and writing the briefings. And I think what it sounds like is like when was it New South Wales? You said that the state has already, and New South Wales, that's good for a first one, right? Like,
yep.
Probably the most, what's the word? Not powerful.
Populous. It's the most populous state in the country.
Oh, exactly. Like the majority of the people live in the country live in New South Wales. So to start,
it's got a big animal industry, big agricultural
industry.
So
yeah,
it is a very important precedent, and we want to make sure we get it right.
That's what I was looking for, precedent. Because oftentimes it's Victoria who takes the lead politically when it comes to animals. But yeah, it's really good that Queensland will possibly be the last.
Queensland does a lot of good work behind the scenes. The department, they lead on a number of national standards, so they invest. And again, it's all relative compared to other states. They invest a reasonable amount, but nowhere near the amount that is required to meet community expectations. But yeah, no, you're right. We're confident that we have the strategy and the blueprint for how to reform the system. It's now a matter of putting it into practice, and that requires quite a lot of work and resources. And we've got a small team So lobbying by its nature is very resource intensive. Like there's no substitute for having people in the halls of Parliament meeting
Maybe
people.
you need to do a reality TV show. There's all
Right?
these lobbying TV shows, right? Think of like The West Wing, and they're all, everyone loves those shows.
Not quite as exciting as that in practice, though, Ruth.
Yeah, but there would be
I think people would be falling asleep.
license, throw in a few affairs and stuff like that. But the main messages, it'll get a lot of attention on your work.
If it was reality, I think people would be switching off and falling asleep within the first 10 minutes of listening to me bang on about regulatory capture.
Regulatory capture.
I hope that's not happening now with the podcast, but yeah.
No. So how can I guess, you speak about resourcing, and that's important. Like, we all need money, right? To create change, that takes money. It takes smarts, it takes people, it takes money. For the people, those people that are just sitting back, listening to the show, who really want to play a part in this, they want this change or these changes to happen. They want to see battery cages gone. Definitely. Like, we want 2036 to come and then be no excuses, or we can't do it because this happened. Because there's always that possibility. If I put my negative Nelly hat on, I'm like, until it happens, I'm not going to believe that it happens. There's going to be someone who tries to find a loophole, and
no, you got to keep the pressure on right up until the very, very last
until it
actually used. Likewise with live sheep exports. I mean, we got the legislation through Parliament, 4-year phase out, but there's going to be tremendous pressure to overturn that, and our community, our sector needs to be there every step of the way to support that policy right till the very last boat leaves in 1 May 2028.
When you think about the phase out for the sheep exports versus for the battery cages, it's so much shorter.
Yeah, because it's
less infrastructure.
Much less infrastructure. You don't have major systems to redesign. You're talking about a small number of animals. We're only, again, relatively small number of animals. Yeah. So in battery cages, we got over 10 million hens in battery cages, unfortunately, right now. With sheep exports, you're talking about between 500 to 600,000 that are going out. Obviously,
so it's a much smaller industry.
Still really bad for animal welfare, but in terms of the size of the industry, it's tiny, and the ability of producers to, instead of sending sheep live on a boat, to the port, they can send them to the local abattoir. And the abattoirs in WA, where live exports takes place, just happen to be in all the major sheep producing regions anyway. So it's not like they have to truck them halfway across the country. There are abattoirs there in WA right now that can process those sheep. And I know a lot of people don't like animal slaughter at all. But the difference between an animal going to a local Australian abattoir compared to being sent on a boat over into the Middle Eastern conditions to be slaughtered without any kind of stunning
including the stress of the travel and what happens on the journey. But it's like you're reading my mind, because I was just going to say, for some people, and this is always, the animal welfare versus animal rights model. You're always going to have, like, I know you, same as me. Yeah, we want animal rights. We, in a perfect world, this wouldn't be happening at all, But it's kind of like, well, we don't live in a perfect world. And if we can get better welfare, that's better than nothing. And that's the thing. If you argue too much on that, in quotation marks, what's considered extremist point of view, the likelihood is you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, it's just a different area of debate. So you've got your ethical debate, where you're talking about, fundamental questions about rights and welfare, and is the continued use of animals at all morally justifiable? That's not a debate that our current political systems will even entertain.
No.
But the thing is, regardless of which particular philosophy the community may or may not adopt in the future, we will still need an independent system of governance to essentially oversee those human-animal relations, the way humans interact with animals and use animals. Whether it's a rights-based framework or a welfare-based framework, you will still need an independent body to oversee that and to enforce whatever the standards or rights are in the given time. So the infrastructure that we're setting up now can be used for whether it's a welfare-based approach or a rights-based approach, depending on whatever future generations of Australians want to see. So it'll be the Animal Welfare Commission. If one day in the future the majority of Australians support an animal rights viewpoint,
Animal Rights Commission.
It's the infrastructure that we're setting up is kind of agnostic to whatever the particular political values are, but it's necessary regardless of which value we adopt as a society.
Yeah, love that. I mean, it's setting up that framework that is malleable enough to, sit in either camp or a fusion of both, and significantly better than the framework that we have now. And there is, if anyone wants to learn more about the Alliance and the work the Alliance does, so much information on the website. And I'm looking at the moment, you've got this, our theory of change relating to systemic change, and it sets out all the interventions and the programs, reform, accountability, representation, and the outcomes, and that all equals systemic change for animals. Yay, everyone's celebrating. So I guess is that kind of like the mud map that you're working towards?
Yeah, that's
working on.
Yeah, that's kind of a visual display of our strategy, our theory of change. I think it's just kind of a bit of a a buzzword for describing the way we organise our work and what the what the outcomes are that we're seeking to achieve, and what the causal relationship is between those things. And we've got 3 programs. One being reform, which is a lot of what we've been talking about today. So that's reforming the broken system, creating a new system. Second program is accountability. So in the interim, before we get to that reformed system, that may take, as I said, decades. In the interim, we need to keep the current broken system accountable as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
So, and the beauty of the accountability program is that the evidence base that we generate through increasing transparency and accountability over the current system, we can then use to promote the reform program. So we can say, look at how bad this decision-making process was. It was completely co-opted by the relevant industry, regulatory capture, blah, blah, blah. This is why we need these reforms.
Yeah.
Then the final program being the representation program, that's all about coordinating our members and other organisations around particular issues, and then representing them in a really effective, strategic way. And the idea behind that is not that the Alliance will speak on their behalf. The idea is more about coordination and unification on message. So it's not about speaking with one voice. It's about speaking with multiple voices, but with the same message. Because that's when you get cut through with government. Governments hear from hundreds, thousands of different interest groups. And if you've got multiple interest groups within a particular sector that are saying different things, or worse yet, they're saying things that are contradictory, it's all white noise to the government. The government's just like, I don't know who to listen to. It's all saying different things, and then they block them out. But if you're saying the same thing and they're hearing, okay, this group said this, this group's saying the same thing, all of a sudden that message crystallises within their mind, and that's when you get the cut through.
Yeah, it's all strategy, right? Clever strategy.
Yeah, concentrated interests are always more influential than diffuse interests.
Yes.
It's a fundamental principle of political influence. So the more coordinated and unified your sector is, the more influence you will have with government.
Did you learn that in your PhD or
Did.
your on
Yep,
the
that's
ground?
all PhD. No, that's all. That's PhD stuff.
So
yes, that's with my nerd hat on.
All that hard work you did, Jed, is all paying off.
It has. I recommend, if anyone, like if you like sitting down and reading and writing for days and days and months on end, PhDs I love the freedom and the liberty they give you to explore things in a really deep
to go
way.
really deep.
Mm.
I think I need a lot of snacks. I'd probably put on 10 kilos because I'd be like,
And staying focused is the hard thing as well. I'm glad I did my PhD. Well, actually, no, social media and everything was around by then, but it doesn't feel.
There's no TikTok.
Yeah, there's no TikTok. I mean, YouTube and everything still existed, and I did have days where I'd go into the office at Macquarie and I would go down a YouTube hole and waste a whole day. Because the thing about PhDs is you basically just need to give your thesis after 4 years. It's kind of, I mean, there are milestones that you need to meet, but you have a lot of autonomy and freedom in terms of how you go about doing it. So you need a lot of self-discipline to keep you on track.
And I always work better, like I'm a last minute kind of person.
So am I, yeah.
And that's how I work best. Like when I was a lawyer and my bosses would always be like, have you done that thing yet? I'm like, no, I've still got a week to go. Calm down. And then I'd be there at the last day, but I would get it all done. It would be great. Work well.
And procrastination and that rationale would work really well if you used that procrastinating time productively to do something else, although then it probably wouldn't be considered procrastination. But I rationalize it in my head that once I've got that pressure, I work much more productively, and therefore I'm using my time more efficiently.
Exactly.
But
I'd probably do like a 4-year PhD in 1 year because I'd spend the first 3 years just blah, blah, blah.
That's 90% of PhDs.
Yeah.
That's what happens. And
that last year, I can't see anyone, talk to anyone, do anything. I'm doing my PhD.
You have like serious stress in the last.
Yeah.
I did extend my PhD for 6 months, by 6 months. I think I wrote probably 80% of my PhD in the last 6 months. And it's not advisable to do it that way, but that's the experience of a lot of PhD students.
Yeah, because it feels like, oh my God, I got 4 years.
Yeah.
Anywho, if people want to get involved, whether it's obviously, they should all of you should all go and check out the Australian Alliance for Animals website, find out a bit more about Jed and Bitter and Meg. And there's more than the three of you working there now, I saw. You got a few.
Yeah, so
Anastasia Smitenka is on the board.
Yep.
Can never, Anna and I worked together for some time. Hello, Anna, if you're listening. And there are some other familiar faces there. So it's growing.
Yes. Yeah, we've got a team of 5 now. And, we need to, to really achieve our goals, I think we need to grow a lot more. But no, we've got a great team. Everyone's really committed and does, really fantastic work. We have a very ambitious sort of agenda, and we're probably, I would say on reflection, we've probably got a few too many things, but so there will be, a decision as to we either need to grow or we need to focus in on a few key priorities, but we're probably working a little bit too much, I would say, at the moment to be sustainable without burnout. So we're like many startup organisations, it's an issue we need to.
You're no good to anyone if you burned out.
No. So we've got to get that balance right, and
well, resources would help. Like people can donate to the Alliance, can they?
Absolutely. Yep, we're a registered charity, so yes, you can donate to the Alliance. You can sign up to our email list, so you get updates on everything we're doing. And
it's always positive news. Look what we did.
Yeah, we're achieving a lot of outcomes. So we're doing a review now that we're two years old. We're doing a review of progress on we call it the Fair Go for Animals campaign, which is all about those institutional structural reforms.
Yeah.
And, we're doing a review right now of the progress achieved in all of those key reform areas. And 5 out of the 6 reform goals, we're seeing tangible progress at a state and or federal level. So it's going in the right direction. They're all baby steps, but they're this, yeah, they're
They're
incremental
tracking.
and sustained. Yeah.
Yeah, and will you do, once you finish that review, will you like report on that
Yeah.
review? You'll probably send an email and have a
Yeah.
thing on your website. And apart from the Fair Go for Animals campaign, what are the other campaigns that the Alliance has?
So that, yeah, the battery cage phase
Oh,
out,
yes, yes, yes.
ending
The live
live
lamb
and
cutting,
cutting, mulesing, ending live sheep
live
exports, which of
sheep.
course, well on the way doing, and improving the welfare standards for meat chickens. So chickens grown for meat, they're
Yes.
different breed of bird to the eggs that we use for the hens we use for eggs. There's many more meat chickens. There's like 700 million of them that we slaughter every year, and they have a really horrible time, unfortunately.
The cruelty issues associated with meat chickens. Like I always see the images in my mind. Like I don't look at them anymore because I don't need to. I know what happens, but their poor little legs and their big heavy bodies, and they can't even walk. Like how is that?
Yeah, they're effectively bred to suffer because of the genetic selection over several years. That is,
Fast growth means higher
yeah,
productivity means more money.
they meet slaughter weight within 6 weeks.
It's so
They're
unnatural.
still
And
little chicks when they're little chicks, mentally and in terms of their age, but they're big, grotesque birds by the time they're slaughtered. Even though, they're 6 weeks old, and we've created that through
it's
genetic
Frankenstein.
selection. So I need that. That's a real priority that needs to change. So the consumers and the general public are not aware of that. So there's an awareness raising piece, and then there's a piece involved in making sure food businesses are on board with improving standards there, because it's not good.
Yeah, all of the attention. There's so much attention being given to battery cages, which is worthwhile, but that's why we're getting traction. The meat chickens, there's always been campaigns about the welfare issues associated with meat chickens, but it hasn't had the results, I guess, that battery cage movement has. And it made me think when we were talking about how it is so unnatural. You mentioned that for the battery hens, you mentioned that for the meat chickens. Just bringing it back to the name of this show, The Natural Animal. Like, these animals are not living natural lives. They are, like I said, they're Frankensteinian lives. It's like they're being injected with these growth promotants, and
Well, the meat chickens, they're not they don't need growth promotants because they've been genetically selected to grow at that rate. So they don't,
like Frankenstein. It's like genetic modification.
Yeah, the genetics through the selective breeding for high growth rates has led them to increase body mass at that rate without they don't have growth hormones. They don't need them. They just within 6 weeks they're a balloon of breast tissue, and then that puts a lot of strain on their skeletal system and their cardiovascular system, and then by 8 weeks of age they can barely walk properly, and then they spend a lot of time down on their haunches. And it's not a life that's worth living for them, and we're doing that to 700 odd million of them a year. So it's a priority.
And when I think about the work that I do with pet parents and cats and dogs, and the food that cats and dogs eat, and if you think about the majority of food that cats and dogs are eating are factory farmed, not even human grade, so then pet grade, but they're all, most of it, unless there are some brands that are making pet foods that are only from free ranging. There's obviously organic systems as well, but the majority of pet food is factory farmed, lowest quality possible. And you think of like the amount of cats and dogs that there are, and the amount of animals that they are consuming. Like, that's a big part of it too. And it's always, it's something that I've been accused of, in terms of, you're telling, by someone who you actually know, they said to me, "Oh, you're not vegan because you're telling people to feed their animals meat." And And it's just this whole kind of ethical dilemma, right? But it's real. And then, I often say it with clients, particularly there's a lot of pets with allergies or with food intolerances. And then they go and eat food that's like crocodile or something else. And I'm kind of like, how many species are we going to decimate just to feed our pets, right? It's a huge issue.
Yeah. I don't know what the volume is that goes into pet food, but I'd imagine it's a
lot of it is waste product in terms it's not even in the human supply chain, like it's pet supply chain. So it's, what it's not being sold, but it still comes from those same systems. So the issues are still the same. But then you have the same issue as you do with food for humans as you do with food for pets. Most people either cannot or choose not to spend more money on free range or organic. And that's just the reality. As you said, we are in, the whole world is in an economic crisis. So it becomes this whole bigger thing. There's so many different factors that go into it, and we could go on 10,000 different tangents. The reason I bring it up is just because it is a factor, and I would love for people to have some more attention around what they are feeding their animals, because that's relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all part of the same, as you say, the same supply chains. And there hasn't been a lot of focus on the pet food industry. I mean, some groups, of course, do a bit of work on that. But it doesn't have the same profile as, of course, the human markets for animal products.
Definitely. I'm sure it will come. Okay, so what is next on the agenda for the Alliance and for Jed?
Well, more of the same, really. So, we're 2 years in, so it's really just the start. So it's about how we go around building and seeing the commitments that we've secured through political campaigning implemented in practice. And then once we do start seeing the reforms implemented, then the task of building on them and measuring their actual impact, because of course this is all a big grand experiment at the end of the day, setting up independent systems for animal welfare. Will it actually lead to improved welfare standards on the ground as a result? So that's further down the track, but that will be part of our evaluation process. Will be measuring impact. We can measure the reforms we're achieving, but what's it actually mean for animals on the ground?
What's it actually doing? That's going to be interesting. You're going to have to live forever, Jed.
I know. I'm going to be. Well, I'm looking at 2050 for some of these things.
You could have a full head of white hair by then.
Yeah. Getting there already. So
you better look after yourself, because we need you. The animals need you.
There'll be many strong advocates, young advocates coming up that will be able to carry on the work. So
we'll be able to pass the torch.
If we're all still around at mid-century.
It could all be moot. We could all be wiped out by
AI, climate change, nuclear war.
Yeah. Mother Nature, she's like, I'm done with all of you people. I'm wiping you out, and we're going to start all over again.
Well, AI might make that decision for Mother Nature. We'll see.
Oh, yes. We shall see. Times.
On that bright note.
Yes.
Great way to
end of the world. In the meantime, we will keep fighting for change and improving the lives of animals as best and in whatever way we can, whether that's actually working for an organisation like the Australian Alliance for Animals, or donating, or signing up to emails, or writing submissions, or did I say signing petitions, or just, getting the emails, looking at the website and talking about it, sharing this episode with any animal-loving minded person, so that they can similarly learn about all the amazing work, all the people that are working hard out there to make a change for the lives of animals, because they deserve it.
Yeah, they need your advocacy.
They need our advocacy. We all have a voice. We should be using our voices.
And especially in a political way. Everybody's got a state and a federal representative. they are supposed to work for you. So if you care about animal welfare, go and seek a meeting with them. You don't need to be an expert. You just need to express what your concerns are. Lots of materials on our website if you do want more policy information. But make yourself known to your federal and state members, and don't be afraid of being a pest. Just get in there and write letters, make phone calls to their office, and try and get meetings and go in and express what your views are. And even better yet, do it with a group of friends and family, and get a bunch of you together.
Just make a day of it.
That's when they start listening and they start getting worried. Oh, I better organise it. Oh, okay, we better listen to these people because they might, be a pain in the ass come election time.
Exactly.
That's what you want to do.
Yeah, be a pain in the ass. And I've got another suggestion stemming from this cheesy American show that I've been watching, where there's this old lady and she's been like campaigning the local mayor, and so she bakes him muffins, and so she always takes him muffins. So when you go to your politician's office, take some baked goods.
I think that'd be a great lobbying tactic, Ruth.
I think so.
We might have to adopt.
You should start doing that.
Yep,
baked goods. Find out the politician's favourite baked good. Or if it's muffins, maybe they want blueberry and maybe they want apple and pear.
I think you're onto something. You're onto something there.
I reckon change the world with muffins, with baked goods. It's like they say, a way to a man's heart is through his belly.
Say the same thing about politicians. I think you'd get pretty far, because it wouldn't be a common thing that people do for them, because a lot of people are angry at politicians. Exactly. They come in with the nice baked good angle. Might get a better reception.
I reckon. On that note, start cooking, people, or hire a caterer. Go to your local muffin shop and buy in bulk, and go and have some meetings. Makes me feel like eating some. I do love this, but this TV show is so bad it makes me want to eat all the time, because they're always eating muffins and croissants and pancakes. I always have pancakes for breakfast. It's like, oh my God, I love pancakes.
What is this show?
I'm embarrassed to say it on the airwaves. It's called
you can edit it out.
It's called Chesapeake Shores.
Chesapeake Shores.
It's on Netflix, and in America it was on the Hallmark channel. That's who produced it.
Right.
So you already know it's going to be cheesy. The first season, like when I first watched the first season, I was like, this is the cheesiest acting ever. These people can't act. But it has gotten better. There's 6 seasons, and I've been binge watching it. It's now season 5. But they're just always eating.
And sometimes shows are so bad that they're good, and it's like, watching a car crash. It's like, I can't look away.
Yeah. It's very high drama relationship. I love drama. So, it's perfect for me. But, yeah. Doesn't help with all the foods. All righty. Thanks, Jed. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Did I miss something? Because
no, I think we've covered absolutely everything. So thanks for having me on, Ruth, and it's good to catch up.
Thanks, Jed. Took a while, but we did it. All right, everyone, check out Jed, check out the Alliance, help them out and bake some muffins and take them to your pollies. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ruth. Bye.
What did you think about that chat with Jed? Tremendous work that he's doing with the Australian Alliance for Animals. And you can find out more about their campaigns and all the work that they're doing to improve the lives of animals at their website, allianceforanimals.org.au. I'll pop the link to their website in the show notes. You'll also find all of the ways that you can support them. You can sign up and get notifications of all of their campaigns, all of their campaign updates. It's really, if you are, diehard animal lover, it's a really handy resource to keep your finger on the pulse. Now, there was one question that I forgot to ask Jed, which was, if you could change one thing about the human-animal relationship, what would that be? His answer was, he told me on email, I would change our speciesist attitudes to ensure we treat animals in ways that reflect their sentience and intrinsic value, not simply their utility to us. I love this because animals do have sentience, they do feel, and each individual animal matters. They have their own intrinsic value. They have their own interests. Every life matters, right? They are not there for us to use and abuse. They are living this life and enjoying this life with us and have as much value and importance as we do. Now, be sure to check out the beautiful pet foods available from the sponsor of this podcast, Frontier Pets. They provide better pet food for a better world with premium quality ingredients sourced from ethical Australian suppliers. They're human grade and evolutionary appropriate for your dogs and cats. Learn more at frontierpets.com.au and don't forget that special discount code NaturalAnimal15. And if you enjoyed this show, I would love for you to leave a review and share this show with others. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you have ideas for show topics or guests, if you've got questions, you've got feedback about a particular show or a show in general, head over to ruthhatton.com/podcast and fill out the feedback form. Check the show notes for all of the links, and big love to you and your animal kin. I'll see you next week.